Welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are taking a look at a game called Tunguska Legend of Faith that was released on the PlayStation in the year 2000. This here was more or less like a budget type title. I remember actually when I first got this myself, I actually knew nothing about it. And I remember actually seeing it in one of the local game stores. Now it was going very cheap. I remember actually going in, I didn't have a lot of money on me and I was just looking to get something, and I seen this, and I'll be honest, I'm a sucker for games with pre-rendered backgrounds because I'm absolutely a humongous fan of Resident Evil games and anything that's kind of looks similar to it. So I was kind of drawn in by the visual aesthetic of the game because it did actually look very good. But it's primarily the premise of the story is the main character. He is actually in prison and he's actually sentenced to death on the electric chair. And while he dies, he's passed on to some other type of realm, and you end up in this kind of region where you're going through like a castle where you're trying to obviously complete tasks and so forth to try and get to grips with what has been going on. It doesn't really kind of go into the story as too much. You kind of get a glimpse of it in the main intro at the start of the game, but there isn't any real story to it. You're literally just, apart from the nice looking scenery and the backgrounds in the game, it uses pre-rendered backgrounds with fixed camera angles, the likes of the Resident Evil games and other games like it. And you go around and your main premise is to literally fight off enemies, and you need to actually defeat them in order to be able to unlock certain areas or gain keys on them so that you can move forward to the next area. So you're using fighting mechanics, which from my own experience I do remember, and I've played quite a few combat related games using pre-rendered backgrounds on the PlayStation back in the days, and they were never really executed all that greatly. And there's been quite a few. There was this here, there was Perfect Weapon, there was the Crow City of Angels. I've also done previous videos on them. I'll leave links to them in the description so you can check them out. Now, I enjoyed them, but they're not the easiest of games to play and get into, because using combat mechanics with games that use pre-rendered backgrounds, it's very, very difficult to determine and anticipate exactly where people are on the screen so that you can actually try and engage in combat. But the only game that I actually do remember playing that actually utilised that, but also mixed gunplay with combat, with physical combat, was Time Commando, that used a lot of these elements, and it was the only one that executed it fairly well from when I played it back in the day. I showed it briefly in one of my first videos on the channel. Again, I'll leave a link in the description so you can check that out, but I will be doing a review on that at some stage now in the future, so keep an eye out for that one. But I enjoyed that game also. So this here, going back to Tunguska, it uses kind of a similar kind of preference. Now when you're going into the likes of these hallways in these big kind of open like mansions, it is difficult because you're wandering around big long hallways and corridors, and even though there's not much in terms of the story, it's also the playability system in the game is very, very kind of linear to a point where it's pretty much just the same kind of thing over and over again. You're literally just getting through an area, fight off a few enemies, and if you can defeat them, which is extremely difficult because the computer AI is so cheap and cheesy that if you don't really know what you're doing, and you have to rely on absolutely pure luck in order to win battles, because you get crucified in this game. This game is extremely difficult. I will admit, I never ever got too far in this game. I think I ever only got maybe not even a third the way through the game, and I just gave up. It's one of the most, if not the most difficult game I've ever had to play on pretty much any console. And I kind of find it sad in a way because I do really like these type of pre-rendered style background games, but when they're not executed well, like this game here is, it is very, very difficult to want to like it. It's because it's pretty much the same thing over and over again. You're rinsing and repeating, and even though the game may visually look decent enough, it does get very, very repetitive very quickly. That's the one thing I will admit from playing it. And even now, as I've gone back to actually play it when recording this video, I realise now how difficult it actually was. Funnily enough, because I'm actually playing this on an emulator as well. That's the reason why I'm able to get so far on it, because I'm able to save it at any point in time. So it is making my trip through it a little bit easier, and that's why the game's running at a faster speed. But it hasn't taken away from the actual overall difficulty of the game, because I found it difficult back years ago when I first played it, and it's just as difficult today. And the thing is with this game, because the developers really didn't really think about the aspect of the game of who would be playing it. They literally, in my opinion, I think they just put it together and didn't really think of the gamer in general. For a casual gamer, this is not a game that's worthwhile playing. It, like I said, is extremely difficult. And like, you can save it at any point, but you have to rely on pure luck to literally get through the areas. Like, you will die literally 100 times over before you get one good attempt at actually getting past, say, a trap or even winning an actual fight without absolutely getting annihilated. As you'll see later in the video, there's certain fights that even when I was playing it, recording this video, I just couldn't defeat the enemies no matter what I did. You get a few hits in of them, but not before they destroyed you. It's so cheap and just cheesy how the computer AI it's ramped up to impossible difficulty, that it leaves it that if you did actually manage to finish it, you'd be one of the lucky ones. I don't know of anyone that's ever finished this game, because I couldn't finish it, and that's why it does leave it to be so repetitive. And it is kind of disappointing, because I do really enjoy pre-rendered background games. But this here was definitely a weak one. Now, it is worth experiencing it just to see how these games actually are, but you will only literally play it for 10 or 15 minutes and then you will have had enough. Honestly, like, which is a pity. Because even the traps, as you can see there, you will have to try it numerous times over and over and over and over again just to be able to get through the same part. For the first two sections of the game, you're literally wandering around two different types of castles similar to this here, where you're having to get like statues, so that when you get one, as you can see now in a minute, you actually have to go back outside to the start point, and you have to go up to like the tower that I showed you at the start of the game, and you have to use those statues, and what it will do is it'll rotate that tower around to the next section. It's kind of like a little bit like a labyrinth, and you need to complete each one in sequence to be able to move forward. But for the first two castles, it's literally just primarily like it was the first one. You're just going through corridors and literally just fighting a few enemies, fighting a boss, getting the item that you need to progress and moving back. But then when you get onto the third section of the castle, then the game does open up a lot more. You have more rooms to explore. You've actually got a bit more in terms of puzzles. There's different intricate parts that you need to do, and you need to go do A, B, C. If you want to unlock something, you need to go and get a key to unlock something else, and there's different types of puzzles involved. So it does open up, but again, it still doesn't take away from the level of difficulty. And if I would be totally honest, even though when I did manage to get a wee bit further, as you can see here, you get to explore different rooms within the castle, which at least it is worthwhile exploring if you can get that far. But it's the combat system that really, and the way the traps operate, are what really kill this game off for me, because they're so cheap and cheesy that it makes it super difficult. And by that stage, because you'll have gone through like probably 100 attempts or 1,000,000 attempts just to get past one fight or one trap, that when you do eventually get into a room or get into another area like this here, you're so deflated by playing it that you just tend to just not bother. Which is a shame, because aesthetically I think the game is actually very good. Like I mentioned, I am a big fan of these style of games. It's just this one isn't executed that well in terms of the control system and the combat. That's what really lets it down. And again, with the computer AI, with the fighting battles and stuff, that's really the weak point of this game. And even in terms of the puzzles, they are pretty simplistic in what they offer, but again, you do have to backtrack a lot when you do get, especially when you get into these more open areas, when the game starts to open up. You can see a lot of ideas that do relate to likes of other games of a similar type, likes of Resident Evil, Parasite Eve, Alone in the Dark, and so forth. But it is a difficult game. Now, would I recommend that you play it? If you're into these type of games and you want to explore what the PlayStation has to offer, I probably wouldn't recommend this type of game because you will get annoyed with it very quickly. But again, if you want to just even explore a lot of these games and see what they're all about, by all means give it a go. But there's a reason why this game was actually very, very cheap when it was actually launched, is because it's not a very well executed game, unfortunately, which is a pity. The best part of it is its visual style, the looks, but that's pretty much the best that it has to offer. Now, I don't like really speaking too negatively of games because, again, I did spend a lot of time, actually, I remember years gone by when I did actually own it, I did actually try to play it. And I was always willing to give it a go, because even the most difficult of games, because I just love the PlayStation that much, I always wanted to try and give it the benefit of the doubt. But this game really did test my patience, and even I will admit I had to eventually walk away from this one, because if a game really starts to annoy you and get really, really repetitive like this game does, it really is time to walk away, because games need to be enjoyable, but they need to be enjoyable to a fact where that a casual gamer can come in and actually at least can see some sort of progress on their journey, instead of having to try the same thing over a million times over just to get past one part. And games like this aren't playable, so it's not executed well at all, which is a shame. But aesthetically, it's actually very good visually, and again, because the camera system does work really well. When you move into a separate camera, it does actually stay, and it stays with the character, so it does work that way. But it's just the combat style, as you can see here, it's so cheap. That's what just drove me insane with it. But that's just my opinion, and I'm sure other people out there have actually witnessed this. If you have actually played it, even if you've even heard of it or have played it. But if you want to try it, by all means give it a go, but just be warned, it is a difficult game and it will test your patience. But I'd like to know what you think. Have any of you actually attempted to play this? Has anyone actually even ever finished this game, more to the point? Because if anyone has, I'll hold my hat out to you and say, you know what, well done, because this game really is something else. It really is. You know, it does capture you with its cover, with its nice graphics and style, but then when you go to play it, it really does let itself down. And the worst thing about it is there's no cheats, so if there was cheats in it, at least it might be worth at least a little bit playable. Like, there's no cheats even for Infinite Health, so it's crazy. But anyway, I'd like to know what you think of the game, so make sure to share your thoughts down in the comments below. So, if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, also subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be updated whenever I release future content, and feel free to share the video. And as always, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and make sure to keep those gaming memories alive.